Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesday here for Bruce Sports. I am co host Ian DeMars along with co host Ryan Solomon. And Ryan, we saw some interesting things happen in the NFL this past week. There were a lot of upsets, there were some defensive minded games, and we also had an unknown back just dominate on the rushing ground earlier this week.
Yeah, this was probably one of the best weeks of NFL football that we've seen so far this year, with at least 5 games that the go-ahead score was scored within 2 minutes of the final of the game. So there was a lot of interesting stuff that we can discuss this week.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get off the show with the first topic. Main topic that happened over this past week was the fact that Mike McCarthy was let go by the Packers after an embarrassing home loss to the Arizona Cardinals. However, we did see this past week that Joe Philbin came in and got the job done in his first game as interim head coach, leading the Packers to a 34-20 victory. An interesting game where we saw him lose two to get things figured out. Aaron Rodgers broke a NFL record for the longest passing streak without throwing an interception. We saw a reversal role of Aaron Jones where we rarely saw him in the first half, but saw him dominate the game in the second half. I mean, what were your thoughts on the game, and do you think that the Packers still have a chance to sneak into the playoffs now with Philbin as their coach?
Well, I think that the game itself was won in large part just because there was something that changed. So a lot of times in the NFL, you'll see a coach get fired, and then the next game, the players will just play better. And it's simply because something is different in their normal routine. So Mike McCarthy and his routine were getting stale for the players. They were used to it. Somebody different running the show interjects some different ideas. It sort of just revitalizes the team. So the Packers looked like they played pretty well. That defense actually played really well, limiting the Falcons to, I think it was just 20 points. And then the offense was able to kick it into gear a little bit better than they had previously. They do mathematically still have a chance at the playoffs. Basically everything that they needed to happen this week happened. They got the win. Eagles lost, Redskins lost, Vikings lost, Panthers lost. So now if they can somehow, and this is a big if because they still play the Lions, I think they still play, who they lost to the first time around, and the Bears, who look really good right now. But if they can somehow win their last 3, the Vikings somehow lose 2 of their last 3, and the Panthers, Eagles, and Redskins each lose at least 1 more game, they will be in the playoffs. Like I said, that's a big if. I don't really see them beating Chicago next week, but they are still somehow in a position to make it into the playoffs if they play well and some other somewhat crazy things happen.
Yeah, and you look at the scenario the Packers are in right now. I honestly think that the only team they have to worry about in this case is the Vikings because you'll look at the teams ahead of them, or they're currently basically tied with right now. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They've been very inconsistent this whole season, and they go to LA next week. So that's going to be a very tough matchup against the Rams, who are coming off of a big loss against the Bears. You look at the Redskins, who are going to be, we're going to be talking about later in the show, are going to be starting another quarterback this week. It'll be their 4th quarterback of the year, so they're starting to fade away. You look at the Panthers, they have to play the Saints twice. One of them is this upcoming week on Monday Night Football, but 2 matchups against currently the best team in the NFC. Looks like they're set to lose at least one of those. So the one team you have to look at that they're going to need help from is the Vikings need to somehow lose a couple of games. It's going to be tough. They have an easier schedule looking at the rest of the remaining 3 games compared to the Packers. But, I mean, it's not over for the Packers. I mean, their chances went from 2% to 6%. So if it keeps going up each week, I mean, they'll still stay in it.
Think how much better it could have been for them, though, had they just beaten the Cardinals. Like, if they beat the Cardinals, we're just talking about if the Vikings lose 1 of their last 3 games, and then they don't even need those other teams to do anything. So Packers really missed some opportunities. They could have won the Seahawks game, could have won the Rams game, should have won the Cardinals game. Looking back in the season, they had all the chances in the world to make it into the playoffs, and they really just have not done themselves any favors.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the reason why the Packers are in this position right now is because of the whole situation with Mike McCarthy, which brings us to this past week's question of the week, which was, should the Packers have let him finish out the regular season or instead of firing with 4 games left? And looking at the results on Twitter, we saw it was a closer split on Twitter. 62% said no, it had to be done. 38% said yes, you have to respect the man. While looking at Facebook, we saw a bigger spread where it was 75% saying no, that he had to go. 25 said that you have to respect him and keep him. And we did have a couple of comments from our viewers. First one was from Tyler Myrick, who is now in Franklin, Wisconsin. What he had to say was, a season is over regardless, so what's the difference? He was a good coach and has brought the organization a lot of good stuff. It was just time for a change, and he thought that it could have stayed for the rest of the year, but he understands where they were going. We also had Andrew Flagel from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, tweet out to us. He said that wouldn't say that respect was exclusive to firing him at the end of the season. So, I mean, we've talked about this last week. It just seems like that it had to be done. If they waited till the end of the season, I felt like a lot of worse things would happen for this organization.
Yeah, that's true. In regards to that question, I still think that Mike McCarthy, I think it's better for everybody to let him go earlier. And I think the only reason you wouldn't is because it's viewed as, for some reason, more respectful to let him finish out the season. But when you look at the logistics, he can start searching for a job earlier. The Packers can start searching for a coach earlier. Other teams can start looking at Mike McCarthy earlier. It just makes the process that much easier than waiting. And I guess they might have felt like they still had a chance this season if they shook things up a little bit. So, I mean, if they did somehow miraculously find a way to make the playoffs, you definitely would be saying they made the right decision.
Yeah, that's very true. It's something we're going to have to keep an eye on over these next few games. They have 2, I would say, tougher matchups these next 2 weeks. They got to go on the road to the Bears, and then they got to go to the Jets in 2 weeks, which doesn't sound like a tough matchup, but Packers haven't won on the road yet this year. So they desperately need to get some sort of road win over these next 2 weeks. But let's move on to our next topic. So as we mentioned at the start of the show, there were a good amount of upsets this past week in the NFL, and one of them happened in Oakland, where the Raiders were able to upset the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have suddenly dropped a couple games in a row, by a final score of 24-21. And surprisingly, after the game, I guess not too surprisingly, was that the Raiders decided to part ways with General Manager Reggie McKenzie. We've seen a lot of changes happen in this organization, the trades, and people getting let go. Does this seem like the right time, or do you think it should have been done earlier in the year?
I mean, the general manager isn't the same as the coach in that they don't necessarily do a whole lot after the trade deadline is over. So for this one, I don't think it matters one way or the other, except for the same thing as McCarthy, where now the Raiders can start looking for a general manager, start that process earlier. And the big reason that this is happening now is because they have so many draft picks coming up, and they need to make sure that they're cashing in on those draft picks and not squandering them. They must not have liked the direction that Reggie McKenzie was bringing the franchise. So I think it makes sense to get rid of him sooner rather than later.
Yeah, looking at it, it was just a weird situation because you rarely see it nowadays where you see someone get fired after a victory, unless it's like the end of the season and the team didn't like make the playoffs. So I guess I was just a little surprised because you could easily say that this was the biggest win for Oakland, and Oakland has been playing better over these last few games. But it seemed like they are just needing to go in a different direction. They're going to be going to Las Vegas soon, and they need to start getting these draft picks, as you mentioned. So they need to make sure that when they do get these draft picks, that they're the right ones going forward, so that when they are in Vegas, they're a real threat coming forward.
How about this? Maybe they wanted him to tank a little bit more and get that draft pick in an even higher position than it would be already. Maybe the win was actually a loss.
Yeah, that's very true. There have been reports that with the win, it definitely keeps them or pushes them out of that number one overall pick. It's supposed to be a defensive heavy draft this year, and it looks like that defense is where they're going to want to go. So, yeah, definitely could be a factor as well. But let's see. Let's move on to our next topic. So we talked about it a little bit earlier on how the Washington Redskins are going to be starting their fourth quarterback of the year of this upcoming week. Mark Sanchez had started this past week against the Giants. They got blown out at home, losing 40-16 in a game where he was actually benched in favor of former Allegiance of American Football San Diego quarterback Josh Johnson, who the Redskins recently signed. He came into the game, put up some good numbers, had 2 touchdowns, and now will get the start this upcoming week. Thoughts on this? Looks like he hasn't started in the league over about 4 or 5 years now. It looks like the Redskins are going to be out of it, but is this the right decision?
I mean, my thoughts on this are that Washington's done no matter what they do at this point. The season is pretty much over for them. Going on, what did you say was their fourth quarterback?
Their fourth quarterback.
The fourth quarterback. They're going on their fourth quarterback. And this at one point in time with Alex Smith was a good team. But then as soon as you start getting down that depth chart, you saw Colt McCoy was a step down and Mark Sanchez was a big step down. There's nobody out there that they can get at this point who's going to help this team actually get back in the running this season. It's over for them. I mean, they're 6-7 right now. They would have to win out to get to 9-7, and even so, at 9-7, there's no guarantee that they would be in. So I think you just kind of pack it in at this point. You can have Josh Johnson start, you can have Mark Sanchez start, but I don't think it really matters one way or the other. There's no one you could pick up who would help you get to the playoffs this year. Colin Kaepernick wouldn't help. He's been out of football for 2 years. There's nobody that you can get.
Yeah, it was a weird situation when I saw them get Josh Johnson, just because I hadn't mentioned it when they AAF did their protect or pick quarterback draft. He was actually one of the first quarterbacks that was protected by his home base, and that was for San Diego. So it'll be interesting to see that if he does start the rest of the season, if he goes back over to his Allegiance of American Football team in San Diego, or if maybe he'll get some more offers in the NFL, and maybe this could backfire a little bit for San Diego in the new football league over there. But that'll be something we'll definitely be talking about once their season starts the week after the Super Bowl. It looks like the first games are set to start there February 9th, so just a couple months away from that. But let's talk about another upset that happened this past week. So the Miami Dolphins pulled off one of the best upsets of the weekend, winning on a couple of laterals on the very last play where we saw Kenyon Drake get past, of all people, Rob Gronkowski to end the game and give the Dolphins a victory. Keeps them in the playoff hunt. They're only about, looks like a game, or it looks like they're tied actually for the final playoff spot. But due to tiebreakers, they are currently out of it as of right now. Do you think that Miami can sneak into the playoffs now after pulling off this miracle?
Well, I think that it's possible. They at least have a chance at it. With Ryan Tannehill back, they definitely are better off than when they had Brock Osweiler going at it. So if you look at the Dolphins, they play the Vikings next week. That might be a difficult matchup for them. If they can get past the Vikings, they're actually going to be in pretty good shape then. And this was really their toughest test left, was playing the Patriots. And they succeeded in that like they always do down in Miami. And of all ways to win this game, that lateral play where the Patriots looked like they were waiting for another lateral that just never came, it was just a very interesting play. And it was one of probably the coolest ways that any game has ended recently. But going back to the Dolphins, their schedule then after the Vikings is Jaguars and then Bills. So those are, if they beat the Vikings, they could run the table. And if they run the table, I think that they're probably going to make it into the playoffs. Because I think that the Ravens are probably going to lose one more time. I think that Colts are probably going to lose one more time. I think the Titans are probably going to lose one more time. So it's going to be interesting, but they set themselves up in a pretty good position, actually, to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and you look at this, I mean, looking at the remaining schedule, as you had mentioned, uh, they play the AFC East and they're done playing the Patriots, so that kind of helps them out a little bit. But even if they end up tying with any of the three teams ahead of them, that means they're still not going to make the playoffs. You need some things to happen in order for them to get in. And I just not sure if I really trust Ryan Tannehill enough to get them to the playoffs. You remember the one time they did get to the playoffs a couple years ago? He wasn't even the starting quarterback due to injury. Matt Moore came in relief at the end of the year and helped guide them to the playoffs. So, not that I don't trust Ryan Tannehill, but we need to see him play consistent football. And in order for that to happen, they got to win this next week. And if they don't, then I'm saying that they're not going to get in.
Oh, I mean, I don't even sort of trust Ryan Tannehill. I will give you that. Like, out of all the people that you could trust to take your team to the NFL playoffs, I don't think that he would be in the running whatsoever. But if you look at the other teams, a lot of these teams don't really have a great situation going on either with their quarterbacks, because the Ravens, you're not really sure what you're getting right now with Joe Flacco. Is he going to play at all? They actually had to defer to Robert Griffin, and they played the Chargers in 2 weeks. So Ravens could potentially lose to the Chargers. The Colts have the best situation with Andrew Luck. They play the Cowboys, they play the Giants, who are something good, and they play the Titans. So you would think one of those would be a loss. Then if you go to the Titans, they play the Giants, Redskins, and Colts. So if you look at this AFC playoff picture, it's actually the Giants that could potentially take down two of these teams if they continue to play well. And the Dolphins, if they get past the Vikings, like I said, I think have the easiest schedule left. So I would potentially say that they are in good running to make it, just because they don't have to play anybody who's really that on fire right now.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. It's just exciting to see that with 3 games left in the regular season now, we're seeing so much craziness happen in regards to the playoff races. It's not just one division or one conference this year. It's both conferences where there's basically, you could say, 10 to 11 teams that are fighting to get into the playoffs. So that'll be something definitely to keep an eye out for over the next couple of weeks. But this upcoming week will definitely be a big week for some of these teams that are on the outside looking to get in to the playoffs. But let's switch gears and talk about a different football league. And no, we're not talking about college football. We're talking about Vince McMahon's XFL. So this past Wednesday, the 8 cities were announced for the XFL teams and where they'll be playing come 2020. And the cities were Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, St. Louis, Tampa, and Washington, D.C. Thoughts on if it's a good idea to go with mainly NFL cities, or do you think that it's kind of a risky play for McMahon?
I feel like it's actually a really bad idea to go where there's already existing NFL teams, because I get kind of what they're saying is that there's an existing market in those places. They're sustaining an NFL franchise already. So maybe those places will be hungry for more football in a different season than the NFL. So I get where he's going with that, but why would you not go target more places that don't have NFL teams that could potentially support them? Like, I like that St. Louis is in there, but why don't you go for like Memphis, go for some other places potentially that have good groups of college football fans? I think that there are better places to go than existing NFL cities, because there's already sort of a cornered market there. Like, you're not going to be able to compete with the NFL by going to places the NFL already is. You have to go to places that the NFL does not already have much of a stronghold. There's a lot of places, in the Midwest that you could go. There's a lot of places that have sizable cities but no franchise already. Capitals in a lot of places. You could have tried to get one somewhere in, Madison or Milwaukee area. There's plenty of places that don't have NFL franchises that you could have tried to expand to, and I think that they missed the boat on that one.
Yeah, and you look at it, Vince McMahon's definitely going to try and upstage like a major league in the NFL. But I do like the fact that he is bringing a team back to St. Louis, and it's definitely something I am going to look forward to watching, just to see if this new XFL is going to work or not. We all do remember the once attempted XFL that did last only one season. But you look at the cities compared to the allegiance of American football, you look at the cities they're using: Orlando, Birmingham, Memphis, San Antonio, Phoenix, Salt Lake, San Diego. And then basically the only NFL city that's been used before is Atlanta. So
Yeah.
they're going in a different direction. I think they're looking, obviously, to get more of a fan base in areas where there aren't NFL teams. But uh, it'll just be interesting to see how those go back and forth. And the AAF does have an advantage coming to play this year instead of next year like the XFL.
Yeah, and like you were saying, nice to see one in St. Louis. Why not put an XFL team in San Diego? Why not put an XFL team in Oakland? There's already infrastructure there for those teams, and there's obviously a vacant spot where there was a fan base that now has nothing to cling to. So I think that there should have been more attention paid to places that used to have teams as well, even if it was way back in the day that they used to have a team. And yeah, I think that there was a lot more stuff that they could do. I think that the allegiance of American football is onto it, where I think the NFL or XFL is missing the boat.
Yeah, and I'm kind of hoping that if these team leagues do find success, that if they do go expansion, that they'll try to get another team in the Midwest because it doesn't look like either of them really are going Midwest. I mean, you look at the XFL with St. Louis would be the exception. If closer to the Wisconsin area.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. So let's move on to some college football, which we like to discuss later in the show. And the big news from the past weekend was Kyler Murray winning the Heisman Trophy. So, in your opinion, Ian, do you think that Kyler Murray was far and away the best player, or do you think that he was very close to not winning this award?
So, I mean, I watch a lot of college football, so I definitely kept an eye on Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa, and then Dwayne Haskins as well, who took third in the Heisman. But obviously, a lot of people thought Tua was the favorite all basically the whole season, just because Alabama was so dominant. But you compare the stats, and Kyler Murray put up better average yards, more touchdowns, and it just seems like he was consistent throughout the whole year. You look at Tua for Alabama, you look at that SEC championship game, and you could start to see that Georgia was figuring out his weak points, and they were causing him to turn the ball over, and he didn't even get to finish the game due to injury. And he did have a knee issue throughout the whole season that kind of plagued him a little bit. But I think that the voters got it right with picking Kyler Murray. I mean, you look at that Oklahoma offense, they were consistent throughout the whole year, averaging the high 30s, the low 40s, basically every game. And they were never a disappointment to watch. You look at, I mean, if I had to choose between watching an Oklahoma game and an Alabama game, I would choose an Oklahoma game because you know it's going to be a high scoring, exciting game. You look at Alabama, you know they're going to put up some points and they're going to shut teams down on defense, which I mean is okay to watch, but you also want to see a high. You also want to see a close scoring game. And Alabama didn't really have too many of those. Oklahoma had a couple of those. So I think that the voters got it right, and I do think that Kyler was the best player this year in college football.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the big thing too was that for Kyler Murray, he had to play well, or he was not going to get a win for his team. With Tua, you could have almost put anybody in there, and that Alabama team was good enough on defense and on offense to beat most of the people that they played, to the point where he didn't even have to play in the fourth quarter most of the games. When you actually did see him versus a team that was competent, he struggled. So I think that that was the biggest thing, was that Kyler Murray had to will his team to victory, had to put up huge numbers in order to win. Tua didn't really have to do that, and I think that was the biggest difference between the two of them. And what ultimately cost Tua was his team being so dominant.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you look at Haskins. Haskins put up very solid numbers as well. You could even say maybe possibly better numbers than both Murray and Tagovailoa. But you also have to look at the fact that their team was probably the most inconsistent out of the three teams, and they had the worst loss of the three teams, losing by over 20 points to Purdue. So that definitely had to play a factor into him falling to third in the Heisman.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. But let's move on to another college football topic. Urban Meyer has declared that the bowl game is going to be his last game as coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and then he is retiring. So the big question here, because we've seen him do this once before, will this really finally be it for Urban Meyer, or is he going to come back and end up coaching a different team, either in college football or potentially the NFL?
This is a tough uh, question to answer because I honestly think he's done coaching college football. I mean, you look at what happened with him when he quit or when he decided to step away from Florida to focus on his health, took a couple years off, and then he had an even better opportunity in Ohio State open up, and that's why he took that job. You look at the college football landscape, I really don't see him going after a bigger job. I mean, the only one you can maybe think would be Alabama, but it's not like we're going to see Nick Saban go anywhere anytime soon, unless somehow he gets a call to a great NFL team that's losing a coach. Who knows?
Apparently not the Dolphins, though.
Very true. But I could possibly see Urban maybe goes to the NFL, but I think everything that happened this year with the whole Zach Smith situation and him getting suspended or Urban getting suspended for 3 games and the team just looking inconsistent. We saw the health issues take effect to him on the field during one of the games later in the year. He has a growing cyst on his brain that's becoming an issue for him. So I think we're not going to see him coaching. I'd say for at least the next 3 years, and if he actually makes it 3 years, I don't think we'll see him coach again. But I do think he's done coaching in college. It would not surprise me if we see him coaching in the NFL in 3 to 5 years. But he needs to take some time off. He needs to make sure that his health is good for the future. But I just think that his time in college is done. And if there is an opportunity that comes up, it could be the NFL.
See, I don't know that he would want the stress of being an NFL coach because I think, in my opinion, that's even more rigorous than a college coach, and I don't think he wants the spotlight on him anymore. I think that this whole thing with the domestic abuse has kind of put him through the ringer and made his life somewhat of a circus, and I think he wants to step out of that light for a while. And for that reason, I don't see him coming back to coach a large college football program. I don't see him coaching the NFL. What I do potentially see him doing is kind of settling into a coaching role at a smaller school, maybe like a D1 that's a little bit on the bowl subdivision side, or a team that's not traditionally good at football, so that he can kind of like quietly build a program without having immense expectations on him anymore, and not having a camera in his face all the time. Because I think he and his family are a little worn out with everything that's happened. I think he would like to kind of just fade away for a while and not have to deal with it.
Yeah, and I do think that, I think for health purposes, I don't think he should come back. I do think he's a great coach, one of the greatest coaches ever. But I think if health clears up, which is kind of a similar situation that he had before he came to Ohio State, his health cleared up and a great opportunity came up. If that happens again, I think the next step would be the NFL, and it would be a great opportunity. Like I said, I don't know where that could be, but if it's like 3 to 5 years, I could possibly see it happen. But I don't know. That's just something we're going to have to wait and see over time, I guess.
Yeah, I just think that the health issues, are not conducive to doing something that's on a grander scale than you're doing now. I think, if anything, that would tell him scale it back. But that's just my opinion on the matter. But now it is time to look ahead to next week and pick our upsets and games of the week. Let's start with game of the week first, Ian. Which one are you most excited to watch next week?
Well, looking at next week, there is a big time matchup on Thursday night. It's between two AFC West rivals, the Chiefs and the Chargers. The Chargers, you could probably say, are maybe the hottest team in the NFL right now, getting some great play from Philip Rivers. The defense is starting to look better with Joey Bosa back. They are playing currently without Melvin Gordon, but once he comes back healthy, watch out for this team. And I think they have a great chance to make some magic happen this week against the Chiefs, which had to squeak by the Baltimore Ravens. So that's a game that I think has the potential to be high scoring, but also if the Chiefs can or sorry, if the Chargers can contain Mahomes a little bit, it could also be a surprisingly low scoring.
Yeah, I mean the Ravens versus the Chiefs was surprisingly low scoring. It seemed like there was no way to slow down that offense, and the Ravens apparently found a way to do it. I don't think that the Chargers have the same capability on defense, although they do have some solid players. We haven't seen that defense really gel together this year and put up a stellar performance as of yet. But the game that I'm most interested to watch is the classic that is the Patriots and the Steelers in Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. And I think the worst thing that happened to the Steelers recently, other than having a 3-game losing streak, was the Miami Miracle happening, because now the Patriots are going to be focused, and I think there's little chance of the Steelers stealing a game from them. And this is one that the Steelers actually desperately need, because they're only, I guess it would be a half game up on the Ravens, and if they somehow lose that lead, then they're down there fighting for a wild card spot with all of those other teams that we mentioned earlier. So this is really desperation time for the Steelers. The Patriots really are in no hurry to win their division, because they're probably just going to get it by virtue of Miami losing another game. So it's really falling on the Steelers to put up a good performance here, and I'm not sure that they are going to be capable of doing it. But I think that this is going to be a classic matchup. We've seen these two teams play a lot, and I think it's the two best teams that are playing this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely like that matchup too on paper. And it's interesting because these teams played last year in Pittsburgh, and the game again is in Pittsburgh this year. So it's interesting how the scheduling favors the Steelers in back-to-back years. But both teams are coming off of tough losses this past week. So I definitely do think that both teams are going to come out hungry and looking for revenge this upcoming week.
Yeah, I think that they're going to try their best. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think that's going to be a crowd pleaser, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you for sure. But let's move on to our upset picks of the week. So looking at last week's results, Ryan, you did get a big victory picking the Giants over the Redskins. And I unfortunately did not find that much success picking the Cardinals. So looking at our season totals, you climb within a game of tying me.
Getting into crunch time.
Yeah, with 3 games left. So definitely could possibly see you sneak by over the next couple weeks. But you're looking at our records compared to our guests. We're not looking too good. But let's look at our picks this week. Who do you have on upset order?
Okay, so there's a couple that I'm looking at this week. I think the one that I'm going to settle on is going to be, it's tough. There's 2 that I'm looking at that I don't know which one has the better chance. I guess I'll go with the Raiders beating the Bengals this week. I think that Oakland has found a little bit of momentum lately. Derek Carr has actually been playing pretty well, and John Gruden looks like he's actually having fun coaching in the past couple of weeks. So I think that the Raiders are going to beat the Bengals, who are having quarterback problems and injury problems in general.
Yeah, I definitely like that matchup too. We had talked about it a little earlier. The Raiders are playing a little bit better. The Bengals seem like they're starting to get things going a little bit with Driscoll now at quarterback. But I think the Raiders do have a great opportunity to get a win. Even though it would hurt them draft-wise, they definitely have a good possibility there. But let's see. Who am I going to pick this week? This is a tough one because there's a lot of spreads you look at right now that are kind of even. So that kind of eliminates the upset in that one. But
yeah, like the Cowboys-Colts game looks like it's about even. Cardinals-Falcons.
Yeah. So you know what? I'm gonna do this because I picked them every week, and they're an underdog this week. So I'm gonna go Green Bay. And here's the reason why I'm
Okay.
going Green Bay. Uh, they're going to Chicago, cold weather game. Uh, Basically, their season's out of it for the most part. But we saw the Packers last week. Joel Philbin made a statement by doing 2 challenges early in the game, and the offense did look a lot better. It seemed like Aaron Rodgers felt more comfortable this past week. You look at the Bears, even though they did beat the Rams, their offense didn't necessarily play that well. Mitch Trubisky had 3 turnovers in the game, and they only scored 15 points. So I think that even though he did play, I don't think he's still 100% healthy. I think the Packers can come in and sneak by in a close game. I think Aaron Jones has a potential to go off in this game.
Man, that would be a big win for the Packers, and it would keep them alive in the playoffs. I don't see the Packers' offensive line being able to hold up against the Bears' defensive line. I think that's going to be the biggest issue. If they want to have success, they're going to have to get the ball out of Rodgers' hands extremely quickly and probably get up on the Bears early and have Mitch Trubisky be throwing the ball, trying to get them back in it. I think that's going to be the magic formula for the Packers to have any chance of winning. Because if the Bears take some sort of lead and the Packers are going to have to throw the ball a lot, Rodgers is just going to be a sitting duck back there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It seems like he always plays well in Chicago, so that's also a reason why.
It does seem like he plays well in Chicago. And it's crazy because even though there's a very, very, very slim chance that the Packers can make the playoffs, it still feels like they're alive in it. And every graphic that they show on TV now does not have the Packers as in the hunt in the wild card race, but it still feels like they're hanging around, and it feels like it could very quickly change.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that one as well. It'll be interesting to see how that game turns out as well as the other games because, like we had just said, there are a lot of spreads that are currently even. So it tells you that over these past couple weeks, we've seen a lot of upsets. So I think that's the reason why some of the spreads are evened up right now.
It could be. And we saw a lot of upsets this week where a lot of upsets didn't look like they would happen. I mean, who could have predicted the Dolphins over the Patriots? Who could have predicted the Raiders over the Steelers? It was a little bit of a crazy week in the NFL. But that brings us to fantasy time, and it is the playoffs or fantasy football. Ian, hopefully some of your teams are still alive. Who are you? Oh, well, why don't you tell us about it since I heard the excitement in your voice.
Yeah, so I was watching going into Monday Night Football. I was actually looking really well. It looked like of my 4 playoff teams, it looked like I was going to sneak by with all 4.
Wow.
So looking at the Sunday night, basically I needed Tariq Cohen to give me at least like 5 points. If he did that, I would beat the defending champ, back-to-back champ in one of my leagues from back home, and I was able to do that. Looking at the league that I run, where there's a case of beer on, I unfortunately could not win that one because of a great defense is showing by Seattle on Monday night. So I did lose that one. However, I needed Kirk Cousins to do something late in the fourth quarter in my $40. And that interesting thing about it was I couldn't have him throw a touchdown to Cook or Stephon Diggs. And he threw one to Cook. But I still won by half a point.
Wow, half a point. You better hope a stat correction doesn't happen.
I'm hoping so because I was the 8th seed and I beat the 1 seed. So this could be the momentum I get to win my paid league again this year.
There it is.
But before I do go to my ad of the week, I do want to give shout-outs to Matthew McAvoy. He had tweeted at us asking if he wanted Dalvin Cook or Jalen Samuels at his RB2 this week. We had said Jalen Samuels. He did get close to 10 points. Cook did get that touchdown late in the game. So kind of a if-or there. We also want to give a shout-out to Andrew Flegel from Milwaukee. He had tweeted us a couple of questions. One was in regards to quarterback. We had told him to play Baker Mayfield instead of Mitchell Trubisky, Lamar Jackson, and Tom Brady. So you look at that list, you could say Baker Mayfield was probably the second best of those 4 this past weekend. And then he had also asked about a quick flex option before the afternoon games between David Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Tariq Cohen. Looks like that he had actually did a poll on that, and it looks like Juju Smith-Schuster won that. It looks like we had told him to do Tariq Cohen, but it looks like Juju Smith-Schuster had a better game. So hopefully our picks were able to help you guys advance into the playoffs this week. But going now to my pick, I'm going to go with the Denver wide receiver. I believe it's DaeSean Hamilton, receiver from Penn State, who had a touchdown off of 7 receptions this past week with no Emmanuel Sanders going forward. It seems like that Hamilton is going to step up big time for that team, and he is a big threat down the field. So I think he could be a big option if you need to receive their fantasy.
Yeah, that's a good pickup. I have 2 guys that might already be taken in your league, but if you're in a bit of a smaller league, they might still be out there. Jeff Wilson Jr. from San Francisco has been playing pretty well in relief of Matt Breida. The past 2 weeks, he's had 11 points and 9 points, which are not bad. He scored, or he didn't score last week. He had 90 yards rushing, which is pretty solid. And then the other guy, Justin Jackson from the Chargers, who's been on people's radar for a while now, but it looks like Austin Eckler is not going to be able to go this Thursday. And if Melvin Gordon is still on the shelf, Justin Jackson is going to be the guy for the Chargers.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at a good matchup against Kansas City, so could see a lot of him not only in the running game but the passing game as well, as Philip Rivers does enjoy throwing the ball to the backs out of the backfield. So do like that one. And then the Wilson one's definitely a good one as well for the 49ers, as they do play Seattle, I believe, this week, but Seattle does tend to struggle against the run a little bit.
Yep, and just whoever is starting in the backfield for a team as their primary is usually a good bet during playoff time, just because you know they're going to get the snaps, they're going to get the looks. Even if Seahawks are up big, you would think he would still get some catches out of the backfield too.
Also, for those who are in the fantasy football playoffs, if you are a little bit worried about some of the higher seeds that have clinched already that might rest their starters over the next couple of weeks, would be a good idea right now to get a couple of handcuffs for if you're either a Todd Gurley owner or maybe a Patrick Mahomes owner, since those 2 teams have clinched, even maybe a Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara owner for the Saints as well with them.
Yeah, that's true. And it's going to be interesting with the Saints and the Rams because it's going to depend how much they want to win and get that top seed. It looks like it's going to be a big deal because of the home field advantage that the Saints enjoy in New Orleans. So those 2 might be playing their starters for a while, at least until the end of the season, unless you see something weird happen where one team would lose 2 games and the other one would win 2 games. So I think that they're probably going to be playing it out, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah, definitely for sure there. It'll be interesting to see that this week. We also have a couple of Saturday night football games this week. So if you are a subscriber to the NFL Network, do make sure to keep an eye out for those games. I believe it's the Texans and the Jets and then the Browns and the Broncos. So if you want some Saturday night football, feel free to watch one of those 2 games.
Yep, 2 games that no one really wants to watch, but they're going to be going on. So might find out how your fantasy team is doing early this week. So very interesting in that regard. Wish they wouldn't put them on NFL Network, though. I think everyone deserves to enjoy those games.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But you know what? The networks kind of make a little bit of money. I know they get some of those Thursday night games, but yeah, I do feel like if they're able to do the dual stream like they've been doing for most of the season on Thursday, then I feel like they could easily do that as well.
Yeah, I agree too. And before we get going, also, I want to give a shout out to the Dolphins for wearing their throwback uniforms. I don't think it's a coincidence that they played one of their best games that they've played in the past 5 years wearing those uniforms. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, definitely. I do like the throwbacks by the Dolphins. So, yeah, I would definitely agree with you. But with that said, that does bring us to the end of this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesday. So we do want to thank you for listening again. We are the official football podcast of Bruce Sports. Make sure to give us a listen each week on either iTunes, Google Play, or Spreaker by searching Touchdown Tuesdays. Or if you want to listen to us each week live, make sure to listen to us on YouTube. Feel free to follow us on our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can search us using the handle at TDWN2's podcast. Make sure to keep an eye out for our question of the week. And then also, if you do happen to have a fantasy football question before the games on either Thursday, Saturday, or Sunday, feel free to tweet or message us on Facebook, and we can definitely help you out there. Also want to give a shout out to our new basketball podcast, Run It Back. Make sure to keep an eye out for their episodes each week as well. And then again, just want to thank everyone for listening. And then if you're still alive in the fantasy football playoffs, best of luck going into the semis.
Yep. Everybody have a great week. Thanks for listening. We will catch you next week.